Good morning, everybody. Welcome in. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to give everybody a few moments to get situated. Grab some coffee, some water, Red Bull, whatever you're feeling this morning, and we will get started in just a few minutes. But until then, go get situated, and I will call you back in just a few. All right, everyone. Hopefully you have grabbed something to sip on while you listen to this presentation. But we are so excited to have you here this morning with us. And I am quickly just going to turn it over to Ashley and Joe, who are sales engineers here at AttackIQ, and turn it over to them now.
All right, thank you, Madison. Welcome, everyone. So as you know, for today's weekly demo, we will be talking about purple teaming and the energy sector. My name is Ashley Howard, and I'm joined today by Joe Mastromarino. And to kick things off, we're going to start with some introductions. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay. All right, everyone. So I'm Ashley. I'm a sales engineer or solutions engineer here at AttackIQ. I'm based in Colorado. I have been in the IT industry for 8+ years, with 5+ of those years being in the cybersecurity space, SIM specifically. And I've been at AttackIQ since the beginning of this year. And now I will pass it on to Joe.
Thanks for that, Ashley. So Joe Mastromarino, I am a New York City-based solution sales engineer here at AttackIQ, been here just shy of a year. About an 18+ year career in IT, mostly in security. I actually got my start in the energy sector, supporting SCADA EMS systems. But also a long financial services background after that, did a whole lot of incident response, forensics, and strong SIM background as well, along with Ashley. So we've seen control stacks all the way bottom to the top, things that have been working and things that have been less than working. So for me, certainly drove me to do what we do here at AttackIQ. Really excited to do so. So when we move into the agenda for this conversation today, first thing we're going to talk about is what the general problem is that we're looking at across the energy sector and pretty much every sector that we work with. How have we solved this problem before? Where to get started, and we're going to have a demo featuring Ashley as well, and then we're going to talk about where you can go ahead and learn more. So here's the problem as we see it. The problem lies in a lot with the security stack in and of itself. And we'll thank Sisyphus right there for explaining how a lot of us feel when we're trying to figure out whether or not our controls are working. Some of the stats that I can throw on top of this as well is that in 82% of breaches, the security controls were in place to stop that, and unfortunately, they failed. About 85% of all data breaches involved some element of human error, and in a recent poll of our customers, over 70% of them found that at least 25% of their controls were not working. Think about that for a second. What quarter of your control set could you do without and still feel like you have a completely secure stack from bottom to top? What this all leads us to is we have about $150+ billion spent on cybersecurity annually, thank you, Gartner, and companies still wind up in the dark on whether or not they have the protection that they need for the adversaries that they know they're facing on a daily basis. And what we've learned through working with our customers, and this is just a hard and fast fact, is that, well, we're not doing enough. We skipped a step. We're not testing enough or nearly as much as we should be. And it's initial testing and that continuous testing that really sheds light on all of the issues that we have across our entire security stack. Because the biggest problem is not the budget. The biggest problem is not the tooling. It's not the actors that are trying to get in. It's the fact that we're not thinking more like the attacker. We're not testing continuously, programmatically, and testing the way that an attacker would be. You're looking at some definitely unique threat actors and nation states in the energy sector. And you can do this similarly to every other industry as well. And when we think about the center of our security operations, you can now take a look at all of the controls. And there's a lot of stuff on this slide, and I did that on purpose, because we have our endpoint stack, our network stack, our SIM, our threat intelligence, security orchestration, automation, and response, and the people, the security operations center themselves. All of these controls have to be working together all the time in order to be considered effective. There's also all of those different failure modes at the bottom of the screen here. Any one of those starts to go south and you have problems that could happen completely silently. To put a little bit more meat around that, let's say you have a logging failure from one of your network security controls in one of the areas that you're very much concerned about. All of a sudden, that information is no longer making it to your SIM, so your correlation is no longer working, and then you don't get the proper stimulus over to your security operations center, and people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing because they don't know the alert is there. Any of these things can fail at any time and fail silently. So constant testing is the way that you're going to be able to surface any and all of those issues. Because ultimately there's two ways you can figure out the effectiveness of your security program. One is you can test it, or you can let somebody else do it. And I'd rather not let my adversary tell me when there's problems, because that's always going to wind up with us back on our heels like we really don't want to be. So let's take the reins here and take control over our own destiny, shall we? Now, the good news is that even though I've just given you all these problems, well, we've solved these problems before, and we continue to work on this. So let's talk about how we've started to work this through. Now, imagine if you could, in a world where you have complete confidence in your defense in depth architecture, and that you could verify that your controls continue to work as intended, so that you don't continue to have that burnout and that staff churn, because you don't want to keep burning your way through people either. You want to make sure that people are happy in their jobs and what they do, and they're continuing to grow, and you keep them, you retain that staff. That's a growing problem too. You want to be able to make sure that you can measure success beyond the current patch, beyond the log4j, beyond the insert name of latest threat here. And you move it to a real strategic change where you're thinking about the entire attack lifecycle. You can move on from here. Because what you really should be doing is adopting a threat-informed mindset in order to be able to put a little bit more meat around that. You can go ahead and click through that. Because security teams are generally thinking in terms of lists. We may be thinking in compliance first. Let's get that report done. However, we need to start thinking more in terms of the real security outcomes, because quite frankly, the attacker groups that are coming after us are not thinking in terms of lists. They're thinking in terms of outcomes. What do they want and how are they going to be getting it? So if we start thinking in terms of metrics and graphs, then we're going to have a far better understanding of how the attacker is moving through our environment and how we can measure our performance against the behaviors that they are doing, rather than simply focusing on one particular vulnerability. What you're looking at here are a couple of different visualizations that we have in the platform, mostly thinking about the idea that you can graph out what an attacker would be doing, and you can measure your performance one assessment at a time or one assessment over time, and then be able to measure out your own performance. Now, where to get started with MITRE ATT&CK and purple teaming? Let's talk about that for a moment, because that is certainly an important part and central to how you create this methodology. So you can move ahead here. And the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and unfortunately, I'm not in front of all of you today, so I can't take a show of hands and say, how many people are using the MITRE ATT&CK framework today? I usually get about 50 to 60% of my room. So that's okay. You can do some chair calisthenics if you want. That's cool too. But the MITRE adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge, how are we creating this common rubric for the entire attack lifecycle from start to finish, make a common understanding of what the attackers want and how they're going to get it? That's exactly what the MITRE ATT&CK framework gives you. It is central to our platform. It's really a good central namespace for working through different types of attacks and attack groups. So you can move ahead here, because there's a lot of research that goes into building out and continuing to maintain the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The MITRE Ingenuity Center for Threat Informed Defense brings together those best and brightest organizations to continue furthering research of the state of the art and furthering security as a practice. AttackIQ is one of the 4 founding research partners of the MITRE Ingenuity Center for Threat Informed Defense. And we work on projects across the entire industry, but also leading to research that can certainly help the energy sector. There are certain nation state actors that you're very concerned about. One of them, of course, being APT-29, a Russian nation state actor. Building out emulation plans that can help identify when you see those types of attackers inside your environment. That will certainly be helpful to you. Now, if we take purple teaming from a 10,000-foot view, first of all, building and executing against that plan is really going to be key to making sure that you have a good purple team program. And knowing first what and where your assets are. I've been saying this since all of my days way back when I was in risk assessment, was that if you don't understand where your assets are and what's important to you, you'll never be able to calculate your risk appropriately. So knowing that is key to being able to understand where you need to set up your defenses. Energy environments as well, knowing where you have all of those different areas that have different security levels, where all of your SCADA and ICS systems are, the different protocols that are there, what can come in, what can go out, and what's really critical to making sure that your critical infrastructure stays up and running. Knowing your adversary helps you prepare for that incoming storm, because it's coming whether you want it to or not. So understanding those different threat actors, what they are after, what parts of your organization they may be coming after, and then that will help you to build up a plan with your other stakeholders to say, this is how we're going to protect this zone of the network and these assets over here, or these substations, or these buildings. That's how you can build that plan together. And then you come up with a complete debrief and mitigation plan afterwards that says, well, this is how we were not able to defend these areas, and this is how we can do it better, and continue to build up those marginal gains over time. That process you see on the left is another good kind of overview of how that process works, and we have an entire course based on building out a purple team exercise. I'll talk about that closer to the end of the presentation. Now, one of the things I mentioned was the attacker group intelligence gathering. Of course, we're a part of that as well here as one of the members of the MITRE Center for Threat Informed Defense. building up what those tactics, techniques, procedures are, taking apart the malware that they use, doing disassembly on that, and doing a detailed analysis on how all of that malware works and what and where the attacker groups are using that on in order to be able to accomplish their stated goals. So put all of that information together, and by the way, put it in a place that you can access at any time. This is all freely available resources to you. So if you want to take a look at what those threat actors are, what they're doing, what they come after, all of that is readily available on the MITRE website and their GitHub. Now, what use cases are energy customers typically asking for? They're not too dissimilar from other questions that we get from our other customers. The confidence in your team's ability to prevent the next cyber attack. And like I said, insert name of vulnerability here. And are we testing enough for that? What degree of assurance can we give the board, our compliance team, our cyber insurance company that we are defended against the next cyber threat? Because it's not enough to be able to say, yeah, we're good. You need to be able to tell them and demonstrate how you are able to do so now. These questions are getting far more pointed. And then the confidence level that you can detect and respond to energy specific and nation state threat actors. These are all questions that we have coming in. And of course, we have content for and we continue to build answers and content for that. To that end, we've started to put together, and by the way, this is all content, again, readily available to you. These are energy nation state specific threat actors that we have observed and that we have seen. I've been asking around other teams that have also been working with the energy sector and took this poll for you. So a lot of these actor groups you can already see on the MITRE website. Those groups are all there. Those links all work. They are fine. Where they come from, what aliases you may see them as. And what's also important here is that second to last column, AttackIQ content. We already have content for this out of the box. So you can simulate all of these different types of attacker groups and their tactics, techniques, procedures inside of your own environment using the AttackIQ platform. So that threat-informed defense will lead you to a purple team exercise because you can take that intelligence analysis, what were we just putting together, build up that defensive engagement with your other stakeholders, decide on where these attacks are going to run. Because again, you want to test it. You don't want somebody to test it for you without your knowledge. Create that range within your own environment and say, okay, the red team is going to attack, the blue team is going to defend. This is our purple team exercise. If the red team doesn't get through, give them feedback and tell them why they didn't get through. If they do get through, then let the blue team know where our defenses need to be shored up a little bit more and we can do better the next time. It's that continuous improvement over time. And the next thing is, where do you get started? Well, you can start small if you want. You can start with just a couple of machines, maybe just a domain controller or a domain joined asset, maybe a couple of assets in another specific zone within your environment that you want to test out and make sure your controls are working. Maybe that's mapped up to a SIM so you can get back some detective controls as well. You can click ahead just a couple of times because all you need to get started is a command prompt. That's all you're going to need. Maybe you have some scripts that you've written yourself or grab some Atomic Red Team scripts. All of these things are readily available for you, so you can go ahead and grab them and try some of this testing out yourself. The next thing, of course, that you want is guidance on what that measurement is going to be. There's measurements out there already that you can look at, or you can come up with your own, but come up with your own and then be consistent about it. Make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what is considered blocked or stopped, what is detected or not, and then how do you get better going forward. So moving past that, after you've gotten through that initial phase and you say, you know what, maybe I want something like an AttackIQ to help me to build, especially this out at scale. The energy companies especially have to build things at scale, and they need things that are definitely repeatable and able to move very quickly within that environment. Our platform is built to work at scale and is built to work directly in production, and most importantly, to run safely inside of production. We are not doing things like detonating malware. We are not doing things like executing any kind of malicious software inside of your environment. That's key to running all those controls in production so you know what will really happen. We have a very broad and deep set of content across the entire kill chain, over 3,000 different attack scenarios that have been built specifically for testing out your entire security stack, bottom to top. We have an open platform here at AttackIQ. All of the source code for all of our attack scenarios can be downloaded at any time. They are all written as Python modules. You can download those and take a look at them, inspect them anytime you want. You can also use our API to be able to augment the already existing and great reporting that you have in the platform. We have a fantastic community with AttackIQ Academy. Again, I'll talk about that at the end. Our Informed Defenders Council, our Purple Hats conferences, the MITRE Center for Threat Informed Defense, and our Preactive Security Exchange, where we work with other like-minded security professionals across the industry and make sure that we are all working together as much as possible. And then our services, in addition to as being an AttackIQ customer, you have professional services, a customer success manager, and we also have an optional Vanguard co-managed service, which I think is very well tuned, especially for the energy sector where you need probably a little bit more help. You certainly have some big unique challenges that you may need some more help with, especially as you get spun up, and you want to make sure that you're realizing that value very, very quickly. So Vanguard can work with you as a co-managed service there. Now, what does the AttackIQ platform look like? I'll talk about this very quickly and then let Ashley get to some of the really good stuff with the demo. The way that the platform works is that we have agents. You see those agents in the lower right-hand side of the screen. They're going to be your workers. They're going to be the ones that are running those attack scenarios that they download from the AttackIQ platform. They are told to do something, they go and do it, and then they report back whether or not you prevented something. The integration manager you see on the left-hand side of the screen, that is going to be asking questions of your security stack and say, hey, SIM, did you see this? Firewall, did you see this? EDR, did you see this? And report back whether or not you detected things inside of your environment. The platform itself is typically deployed in a SaaS fashion, but I also understand the needs that you have infrastructure-wise, and this is also completely supported to be deployed as an on-premise solution. So now that I've gone through the architecture, I'll turn it over to Ashley to let her go through a demonstration of how you can see some content specific to the energy sector. Ashley, take it away.
All right, thank you, Joe. Let's exit that. Let me get the demo up. All right, so you should all be seeing the platform now. So I would like to start first with our library of pre-configured scripts. As Joe said, these are Python scripts that imitate attacker activity. And we define these as scenarios. As Joe mentioned, there are a number of energy threat groups, and AttackIQ can easily filter by whichever group. And you can do that by either typing that in here or using our filter button here. And since we're talking about the energy sector, let's go ahead and filter on APT29 threat group. So this is going to bring up all of the scenarios or scripts that are tied to this threat group APT29. And we'll start with this one, pass the hash using dumped credentials. If I click on details here, this is going to give us a description of this scenario. It's going to also explain which platforms this script can run on, in this case, Windows. And like Joe said, we can also download the source code. So think of AttackIQ as an open box solution. The other thing that you will get with any of these scenarios is this parameters section, which you can easily modify to your specific needs. And let's say you want to add a specific user for this one as an example. But once you're ready to save that, you can go ahead and hit save as. And what it's going to do is create a copy of this scenario rather than altering the original code. And again, you don't have to touch a single line of code to make these changes, which is really great. So now you're probably wondering how you actually run these scenarios or these scripts. So those are going to be organized into templates for predefined use cases, which we call assessments. So I've already brought up our assessments window here, and these are organized by type. Right now we're looking at all, but you can filter by compliance, security control validation, threat emulation, and you also have the ability to create custom assessments. But since today our focus is on the energy sector, we want to showcase one of our assessments that is used in response to the HAVEX malware strain, which you all might be familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up here. So if I click details, this is going to give us a description of this malware strain. And this is great because this is an attack, this is an attack graph type of assessment. And the attack graph allows you to string multiple scenarios to exercise multiple TTPs, mimicking attackers to see how far they progress in the kill chain. So to actually run this, I'm going to go ahead and hit create assessment and then create new. It's going to bring us to this setup page. And before we run it, I'm going to first explain what this is all about. So the HAVEX attack graph assessment specifically allows customers to test and validate their cyber defense effectiveness against the techniques used in this malware strain by Russian-based threat actors, which target energy and power sectors in 135 countries, and they did this from 2012 to 2018. But the tactics and techniques used continue to threaten organizations today. So let me zoom in there so you can hopefully see that a little bit better. But the first 3 steps here are showing us the attacker dropping the HAVEX malware to the file system. If any of these 3 are successful, then it'll move on to the next step here, which is code injection. And code injection happens in order for the attacker to disguise their malicious activity as if it was executed by a legitimate process. The next step here, the malware will then attempt to achieve persistence by creating or modifying Windows registry key entries. Then the next 6 steps here, 5 through 10, let me zoom out a little bit so you can kind of see all of those at once. So the next 6 steps are all about discovery. And this is where the attacker is gathering pertinent information needed to exploit. Information such as local and remote information, networking, processes running via task lists, files, and directories are gathered during the steps in the kill chain. Moving along here, step 11 is where the attacker dumps browser passwords using Lasagna. Step 12 is where the attacker gathers any local email files as a way to phish and further exploit. Step 13 is where, let me show you there. Okay, step 13 is where a mass collection of various file types happens, and then they're dumped into a zip file for easy access. And the final step, 14, is where the attacker exfiltrates 1,000 personal records text file inside an RC4 encrypted file using a random key by the HTTP post method. So now that I've walked you through what this attack graph is all about, let's go ahead and run this. The first step we need to do is actually select our assets or our endpoints, and we simply do that by clicking on this pencil icon here. I'm going to go ahead and select my assets that I want to run this attack on and hit apply. And then once I'm ready, I just hit continue. It's going to bring us to this page. And to get started, we just click run now. Now, before it actually starts running, it's going to prompt you with this alert. And all this is really telling you is that your technology will respond accordingly. These attacks will run. But the biggest thing here is no permanent changes are going to be made to those endpoints. So this is all safe. And once you agree to that, you just hit run now. And it's going to start running. There's a couple of ways you can tell an assessment is running. You'll see this circling here. You'll see these in progress icons here, as well as these 3 dots circling here. So you know exactly what's going on. And by the way, you can run as many assessments as you want at any given time. There's no limit on how many of these you can run at once. But let's say that this is an assessment that you want to run frequently and gather data over a period of time. And that's where scheduling comes in. So I'll just show you how to schedule. So you simply click on Manage Schedule, and you choose how often this runs, whether that is hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. And then you choose your time frame. And on top of that, we also have reports that can be automatically generated when this assessment runs on a scheduled basis. So you choose the type of report here, and then you just add in your employees that you want to receive this report, and that's it. But this really allows you to have a continuous security validation, which is what AttackIQ is all about. But let's say you want to be notified. Maybe you want to get a notification prior to the assessment running. So to set up notifications, we just come down to our notification section, and you can set up, like I said, a pre-execution notification. Prior to this running, your teammates can receive an email of a CSV file, and that's just comma separated, so really easy to set up. And on top of that, we work with any automatic workflows that you already have in place. You know, you might have a ticketing system already in place. So we can also send a notification when that's done via the ticketing system, be that it's Jira, ServiceNow. You also have the ability to email and to use a webhook as well. So now that I've walked you through how to run an assessment, let's actually look at some of the results here. So we're going to look at the results of this, and it's organized by asset or endpoint. We can from here see the time frame in which this was run. We can see what user privileges are on that endpoint, and we can see if our endpoint prevented this attack or not, and what technologies we have on that endpoint that are there to detect this attack. So let's click into this one here. So again, you can see right at the top which asset or endpoint this is looking at. We can see right here the attack graph, or how far the attacker got in the kill chain. So we can see, for example, step 0 was executed, so it went straight to step 2. And it got all, this attacker got all the way through the kill chain. But if we want to break this down even further, we can just scroll down here. And we'll start with this first one. So this is step 0, and this is the name of the scenario or the script that was run. We can see that we have a panorama on there as detection. And now let's expand it so we can look at this even in greater detail. So I'm going to expand here the activity details. So this is showing us the log file of what our AttackIQ agent captured on this endpoint. So right away I can see that the file was stopped, the file download was stopped by a connection error, most likely caused by a network security tool. So we marked that as prevented. But again, regardless of it being prevented, if we look back at the graph here, whether it's prevented or not, it's still going to move on to the next step. So that's what took place here. So it moved on to the next step, and it made it all the way through this kill chain. But let's say this wasn't prevented. What we're going to do, we always provide you high-level mitigation recommendations on what you can do to prevent that. And we'll look at an example of something that wasn't prevented, and then the corresponding recommendation for that. But you get this with each of these scenarios, and we also provide detection details. So in this case, like I said, we have panorama on this endpoint. If I expand this, we can see that it was detected, and we can see the event date and timestamp. We can see the type of event there, the classification, and a summary. And then we also include the ability to look at the raw log. And you can even copy that onto your clipboard. Maybe you need to email that out to someone in the organization. You know, do some further digging. You can do that. And then finally, we also provide the indicators of compromise details, or IOCs. And this shows us what directories were used in the attack. And if you want to go a step further and use this as criteria in a rule, let's say in your SIM, you can feed this information into Stix feed. It's all in Stix format. So you get all the detail that you need in order to really understand what's going on in your environment. So like I said, I wanted to show you another one that was not prevented. So we're going to look at this one here, the system owner / user discovery script, which is step 5. And if we expand it, again, you're going to get that same detail that you were getting with the other one, but we can see that this one was not prevented, and our log here definitely shows us that this script was successfully executed. So how to prevent that from happening? Again, we have our mitigation recommendations. And in this case, it says we need to install or verify advanced endpoint security technologies. And again, the recommendations will vary from scenario to scenario. And again, we have our detection details. And in this case, our CrowdStrike detected this activity, and we can go ahead and expand it. And once again, look at the raw log. And here are the IOCs, just like the other example I showed you. And you will get this level of detail with each assessment. So you don't have to wonder, if it's different by each scenario. You're going to get this level no matter which one that you're looking at. So finally, I would like to conclude with reporting. And let me just, okay, there we go. So I want to conclude with the reporting because what we're going to be looking at is the exact same information that I briefly walked you through in the platform, but in the form of a report, which really allows you to debrief. And the great thing about this is I mentioned earlier, you can schedule these reports to automatically send out via email. You can even just download them as a PDF and send them out manually that way if you choose to. Maybe you can send it to someone that doesn't have access to the platform, or they just don't have time to log in and go through all of this. You can send them a report. And you're going to get the same level of detail that I just walked you through. So I briefly walked you through a couple of different AttackIQ specific lingo or definitions. And we like to start off every report with an executive summary and the definitions of, what is a scenario, what's an asset. So you, again, understand everything that you're looking at today. And then we also provide an assessment description. So it's the same description that I briefly showed you right before we ran the assessment. So again, you fully understand what you are looking at. And then we also include in here the attack graph overview. This is telling us the step number, the scenario tied to that step, and then what happens if that step is prevented or not prevented. Where does it go from there? So that's really what that section is showing you there. And if I keep scrolling down, we also provide, excuse me, we also provide the assets results overview. This shows us how many assets stopped the attack, how many did not stop the attack, and if any asset did not finish the attack, it would show us that here. In this case, we can clearly see that our assets did not stop the attack because the attacker made it all the way through the kill chain, through the last step, 14. So if I keep scrolling, it breaks it down by asset. So we have 2 in this case. So asset number 2 and then asset number 3. But this shows us exactly what happened on this asset in terms of the kill chain or the attack graph, what steps it took, which scenario that's tied to, and then if our existing technology detected or did not detect it. And scrolling down a little bit further, once again, you have the log details. So this is the exact one I showed you. And then we also have our IOCs here. And finally, we also have what our detections are, and any information tied to that is included there as well. So once again, this is the same information we saw in the platform, but it's really nice to have the option to automate a PDF of the identical data, so you don't need to access the platform every time to get this level of detail. So that is all I have for you today. I will go ahead and pass it back to Joe. Let me go ahead and get our PowerPoint back up.
Fantastic, thanks for that. And as you're doing that, one thing I'd make a note of is that the These are all things that can be done also at the same time. So you can run these types of attack graphs in multiple different areas of your organization at exactly the same time using the AttackIQ platform. Yeah, we can move ahead here because I wanted to get to one thing that I promised you all, and that was the AttackIQ Academy. The AttackIQ Academy, and you can go ahead one more, is a free resource that we provide to the information security community. So anybody can go on academy.attackiq.com and sign up for an account. We have over 32,000 registered students today with over 20,000 certificates awarded with an average net promoter score of over 78. So all of our students are really finding good, high quality training, all instructor led, by the way, all using security and industry experts. So we provide you with all of this really high quality content because, again, we want to continue advancing all of the people that are around us, and we provide this as a free service. You can go ahead and click ahead through that because here's just a sampling of some of the content that we provide. Of course, some of it related to content that you were just thinking about today. So things like the use of the MITRE attack, purple teaming, breach and attack simulation, some of the security stack mappings. There's a couple of different learning tracks that you have there. You can get some Credly certificates, and then you can also get CPEs for some of those courses as well. So this is another great resource that I greatly encourage you to take advantage of. Again, academy.attackiq.com, and you can go ahead and take advantage of that. So with that, that would be the end of the program that we have here today. So in summary, we talked about the problem, how we've helped solve it in the energy industry, and we continue to do so, where you can go to get started, and of course, where you can go ahead and learn more. So with that, I don't think there's any questions. I haven't seen any pop up here, but if you have any, please feel free to reach out to Ashley or myself, and we will make sure that we get those questions answered for you. So thank you all very much for your time today. And again, Ashley, thank you for a really awesome demo.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our presentation today.